We are Gold Ivy.
Our mission is to empower you to own and unleash your truth.
Stories of resiliency are gold, and ivy grows in hard places.
Those hard places are what create space for light to shine through.
You decide what works for your daily life and how to transform our lessons into your gold.
This is Ivy Unleashed,
a Gold Ivy production. Welcome back to Ivy Unleashed. Thank you so much for being with us. It is going to be such a gift today because we are going to get really intuitive today, and we're going to talk about perspective shifts and a bunch of woo-woo-y stuff. And Brooke and I are really excited because we're just going to be curious with our guest today. Andrea Harsch, welcome to Ivy Unleashed.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, we have a lot to talk about. You have been through a lot in your life. And yes. If you're watching, you can see that Andrea is so beautiful and has such a warm presence and is so easy to talk to. But learning about you, you've really been through a lot since the very start of your life. Mm-hmm. And so, and your title, when we think about what this is about, you're an intuitive guide. Mm-hmm. And so those are two big beasts to tackle here today. What is an intuitive guide? And all that you've been through. So wherever you want to start, tell us a bit about who you are and what you do.
I'm going to start with the intuitive coaching just because most people are like, what the heck is that? And for me, the way I use the intuitive part is when I'm coaching somebody through shifting their mindset. Often people think a problem comes from a certain place and they think they know for certain that is where it's from. And I will intuitively feel and know that I don't want to say that they're wrong, but really it's coming from a different place. And I can give you an example actually from a couple of weeks ago. I was on a plane with a stranger next to me and he was telling me all about his life and saying how it was exactly how he wanted it and all these things. And I said, really? I said, I don't think so. I feel in your heart that you want it like this. And he goes, yeah, no, you're right. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, but I don't know why I'm living it this way. And then I said, I think there was a point, and I explained to him like a point in his life where I saw a certain thing happen in his life and it created the person he was today. And he was like, wow, you're absolutely right. So that whole plane ride ended with him going, I've got a lot to think about.
Okay, hold on. Wow. So are you a psychic? Are you a medium? Are you intuitive? Like what? Maybe we should break down what these words mean. And because you've done this to me. Like you've legit known something about me. And it took me a couple of days to actually figure out in my life what you were talking about. So can we talk about the difference between a psychic, a medium, all of these different terms?
So a psychic is somebody, so yes, I first will say, yes, I am psychic, and yes, I am medium. I actually was more medium, I thought, first. I started seeing spirit. I've seen spirit since I was a young little girl. And then I was told I was more psychic than medium by some mentors. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And I'm somebody that's like, okay, well, if that's part of me, then I should get educated on it and I should start tapping into it. And so I did training for that. So psychic is when you know things before they are going to happen, or you know things of the past that have already happened. It's just this strong sense of knowing about past, present, and future.
Okay. So you can sit by someone you don't know
and see something from their past.
Yes.
Is what you're saying.
Yes, but I don't go around reading everybody. So I don't want people to think, oh man, I don't want to be.
So when you say you see spirits, tell us more about that. What does that really mean?
I see dead people.
You do. So you can sit in a room and you're like, I see a man standing over there.
I can, but I often am not trying to be in that place. And so I do have to shift my energy and my consciousness to be in a different place for that to happen. But it does happen. And a lot of times when people start talking about, their past loved one or, grandma, grandpa, whoever, sometimes I'm like, and did they have this, that, I start describing, mm-hmm. They're like, yes. And sometimes they don't even pick up on it that I'm seeing them. I think they just, I don't know what they think, but I'm like, okay, they're here.
And you've seen them from a young age, you said, when you were a little girl.
So when I was younger, I was more auditory. And I think maybe that was just me being eased into it and not, I mean, I saw things like little shadows of things, but I would often hear things and didn't know what it was. My parents said, go back to bed. You're crazy. There's nothing there. And, lo and behold.
Kid, you're freaking us out. Go back to bed. I'd be like, no, you don't. No, you don't.
Wow.
But yeah, it wasn't until I went to a medium. I actually went to a few different ones where they would all be like, oh, you're gifted. And I'm like, oh yeah, sure. Cool. Great. And then I went to one and she was talking about my dad's best friend that had passed and said, he says he talks to you because you can hear him. And I was like, oh, yes. But I hadn't told anyone. That was something I had been keeping to myself because I was thinking I was crazy, essentially, because I'm hearing these voices. And prior to that, my grandfather had passed. And with that, I also was like, stop talking to me. I don't want to hear this. Like, you got to go away. I'm feeling crazy. And so it did stop. But then my dad's best friend passed and I started hearing him more. And then this medium that knew nothing really about my life, she had there was no way she knew any of that. And so I was like, wow, it was very validating that I wasn't crazy.
Yeah. So what are they saying? Like, can you have an example?
So for him, he often would come through with just my parenting stuff. And I would kind of like be stressed out with something. It'd be like, you're doing great, or just like little things like that. But if I'm doing a reading for somebody, it just depends. If they're needing to hear a certain something, they will come through and they will share that. I also will feel them. Sometimes I don't see. So it just depends on the spirit that has passed. I did a reading for someone once and it was more of a feeling. I could feel their passing where this person, they fell off of a ladder and I was like, wow, I feel this boom, like I could feel my body getting thrown back and I could feel hitting my head and all these things. And they're like, oh yes, well, he fell off of a ladder. So sometimes I don't see all the pieces, but I feel it. And so it depends on the spirit.
See, what I think is so interesting is thinking of this being, you're basically your whole life, you've been open to seeing, hearing, spirit, and then to figure out a way that this can be part of how you help people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, like it's got to be mentally exhausting to I feel like it's hard enough to manage my own brain and my own thoughts, and then to be having other people from the other side, their thoughts or words, like, oh my gosh, like to manage that. So when did you start to piece this together into part of your coaching and part of what you do to help people?
And so actually, like you're saying, it is exhausting. And so I have pulled back. Before I was thinking, oh, I need to help people with more of a psychic reading, but it is exhausting. So I realized it was not something I could do day in, day out, all day, every day. And so that's where I've brought in the pieces of it. But backstory is I was very depressed as a young little girl and wishing I wasn't here. And then I got older and I started to pass out, which finally we realized I was actually dying. I would flatline is what was happening. And so eventually, after passing out several times and then running more tests, they put me on this tilt table test where they strap your body down and then your heart has to work all by itself without any muscles because your body is just strapped. It's like do you guys remember that Gravitron ride at the fairs? Mm-hmm. Yeah, where they strap you in and then it's like gravity is just, it spins you around and it holds you up. So it's really gravity that's helping you. And so your muscles aren't working at all. And so when I did that test, my heart stopped almost immediately, which is not normal. I guess when people do that test, it usually takes a while. They sent my mom away. They're like, oh, go get a snack, get some coffee. It's going to be a while. And it was minutes. I remember they started tilting the table and I could feel it. I always have the same sensation where I start to sweat and then I start to feel like I'm going to throw up and then my vision will start to go. And I started whipping my head on there, telling them put the table down and they wouldn't. They're like, we need to see what happens. Well, what happened was my heart stopped and it stopped for 26 seconds. And it was really, I think, just by the grace of God, it started because they said they were reaching for the drugs to start it, but they didn't even know if that would be good enough with the way things had stopped. And luckily everything, I came back. And when I came back, I couldn't see at first because when you don't have the oxygen to your brain, you start losing your senses. And so that was probably the beginning of having some of the perspective shift that I've had. I learned that something wasn't right. I was way too young for this to be happening. I was 17 when it first started happening, but in my 20s when I started doing more tests on this, and I think it was around 21, I ended up getting a pacemaker because after that episode, they took my driver's license and they said I couldn't have it back if I didn't get a pacemaker. And so I had no choice. And I got the pacemaker. And then 3 months later, I went back because I was in excruciating pain. And I told them, I'm like, it hurts so bad. And they said, well, sometimes you get nerve pain. We place it in the wrong spot, and the pocket where the device sits, it can be irritating. And so I've always been somebody that has pushed to survive. And so I thought, okay, I've got to just keep pushing. And I'm kind of being a little weenie is what I thought. But I thought I need to be strong, like just keep pushing. And so I did. I kept pushing and pushing. And then I got to this point where I woke up in the middle of the night one night. I was like, this is it. Like, I'm going to die. There's no more in me. I knew I was maxed out and I wasn't going to keep surviving. And so my mom took me to the hospital and they said, well, good news. We think you have a blood clot. We don't know where it is. And so then they did the scans and they said, well, we can't find one, but your lungs are full of blood and we don't know why. And so then it was one thing after another. And they did a lung tap, and that didn't really give us any information other than the fact that, yes, there was a bunch of blood in my lungs. And so after that, a few hours later, one of the trainees, he was able to find that my pacemaker wire had come loose and it went through my heart into my lung. And so the pain I was feeling, I guess maybe that's kind of nerve pain, but my pacemaker was still turning on and it was shocking me in my lung instead of my heart. Well, I guess both, because there was two leads, one in the heart and one in the lung. And so with that, I was still being paced to a degree, I suppose, in the heart, and the lung was getting shocked. And so that's what the pain was my lung getting shocked constantly. And so then the doctor came in that morning, and this was actually after the staff had told me that night, we are not going to operate on you tonight because the night staff is not as good as the day staff. They're tired, and this is a very dangerous surgery. And so the doctor came in that morning and said he was so sorry for what had happened, and they see about one case of it a year. And he said that I may wake up and I may not. He said, I'm just being honest. He said, what's going to happen here is we're going to go in for the surgery and we're going to pull the wire out. And when we do, he said, your heart may just close up on its own and we're good to go and we'll put a new lead in. He said, or we're going to pull it out and you're going to start bleeding out. And then we're going to have to rush you over to a different room to operate on you. We're going to cut you down the front of your chest. We're going to open you up and do open heart surgery. And so, I mean, I very much knew what I was going into. And people often ask me, were you so scared? And honestly, like, I was at such a point where I don't even know that I could be scared. It was so out of my hands and so out of my control at that point. It's like if you're jumping out of an airplane, yeah, you're scared. You kind of have a choice. Like, maybe I don't do this because I know this might not go well. But for me, it was like, I wasn't going to live if I didn't do it anyway. So there was no turning back, and it was what it was. And so I took that moment and I've sat on it for a long time, and I go back to it really often. And I think about it, and I'm very grateful for it happening. And I feel really proud of myself that I was able to even get through it without freaking out and without panicking and being so level-headed, because I also told myself that if I freaked out and I panicked, I'd put my body in a state of stress more than it already was, and that could affect the outcome. And so I knew I needed to stay calm for the surgery. And I did, and the surgery went well. They didn't have to cut me open, and my heart did just close up. And I know I have angels watching over me at all times, because there's just no way these things would be happening. And with that happening, I also had other things happen. And I got ulcerative colitis years later, and then I got Lyme disease. And then with the Lyme, I couldn't walk. I had mold as well. And I got to another point where I knew my body was done again. And I spent my honeymoon actually doing research the whole time, trying to figure out how can I save myself, because I could hardly breathe. I couldn't lay down at night. My lungs didn't want to expand. It was too much work if I was laying down. Walking was incredibly difficult. If it was distances, I would use a wheelchair. And I got to a point where I wanted to live so bad, which was ironic because I wanted to not live for so long in my life. And so I look at that like, man, God was like, is that really what you want, girl? And so like, he really gave it to me on a silver platter. He really did. And so I realized, no, I do, and I'm going to fight for it. And so I did. And through all of this, I have learned, and this is part of my keynote, is that we got to ask why. Like, why are these things happening to us? If we want to have a perspective shift and a change in our lives, we have to do the reflection and we have to ask why. Because when we ask those why questions, we're able to get answers, and the answers are what are going to propel us forward in our lives.
So when you asked yourself why Lyme's, mold, ulcerative colitis, what was your answer? Dre, tell the people as fast as you can why Move with Gold Ivy is the last mind-body fitness program they'll ever have to buy, and how women are finally getting the transformation they're looking for.
I love a challenge. Let's go. 2 big things. 1, Move provides a fun atmosphere to work out in that actually gets you excited to show up and follow through with your goals. Not only is there an element of fun, but we've carefully curated a program that makes it as easy as possible for women to take care of themselves. And 2, a Move membership addresses every aspect of your health, mind and body. Our Move members are getting the physical transformation they've been hoping for and feeling like they've finally found the group that motivates them on a daily basis. What did I miss?
As a Move member, you receive a weekly workout plan, weekly live or Zoom workouts, an on-demand workout library, transformational quarterly reset challenges, monthly coaching calls, monthly masterminds with health experts, and a private group of motivated members for support and accountability.
It's ready for you when you're ready to boost your metabolism, confidence, and feel your absolute best. Join Move or learn more by clicking the link in the show notes, clicking the link in our bio on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok, or by messaging us on any social channel at Gold Ivy Health Co.
It's your time. Move for your health, move for your confidence, move for your mental clarity, move with Gold Ivy.
Ready for an unpopular opinion? I think if you're capable of running a mile, you can run a marathon. If you've ever dreamed of crossing a finish line in the fall, feeling that crisp air and hearing the cheers of a crowd, the feeling of accomplishment washing over you as you receive your medal, knowing you pushed your limits and achieved something incredible. Fall is prime race season, and that feeling of pure pride is closer than you think. As you probably know by now, I am on a mission to run a marathon in all 50 states. So far, I've run 26.2 miles in 25 states. But the finish line isn't just about the race. It's about proving to yourself you can do anything you set your mind to. Maybe a 5K, 10K, half, or marathon feels like an overwhelming mountain to conquer. That's where I come in. My personalized training plans meet you exactly where you are. We'll chat for 15 minutes about your goals, your chosen fall race, and schedule your 3 coaching calls. Then you'll get a plan built for your schedule, endurance, and even your favorite ways to cross-train. Training and coaching with me is more than just a plan. It's about accountability, safety, and inspiration. I'll be your guide, helping you connect your mind and body for a race experience you'll never forget. You won't just have a plan, you'll have the confidence and stamina to crush your goals. Plus, you can message me anytime between calls for extra encouragement. Don't let this fall season pass you by. Sign up for my customized training plan and coaching today. Visit goldivyhealthco.com/shop or look for the coaching link in the show notes. We also have an entire episode highlighting a previous client in our show notes too, so feel free to go back and listen to that. This is one of my biggest passions in life, running across the finish line, getting that medal, and especially helping others to do the same. Let's get you across that finish line, feeling the triumph you deserve to feel. Spaces are limited, so sign up to get your personalized training plan and coaching with me today.
Because I'm here to help other people that think that that is just what it is. I often tell people, if you think it just is what it is, it isn't. There's so many people that are living their lives believing and feeling like, well, these are the cards I was dealt, or it just is what it is. And it's not. Nothing just is what it is. It's not. Absolutely not. I mean, I've been through it. Like, I've lived it. I can tell you that your health it's your fault in a way, I want to say. Like, and that sounds so harsh. It sounds harsh to say, but it is. Parts of it are, right? There's times where maybe it's not, where maybe the exposure is not our fault. Maybe like the mold, right? Like, obviously I didn't willingly do that, but we do weaken our state by having this energetic shift when we have these negative thoughts and patterns. And often we think that we're not thinking negatively, but we are. And even when we're thinking about getting better, we think that's positive. Oh, I'm thinking about getting better. I'm thinking about how much I want to get better and what am I going to do to get better. And it's like, but you're also telling yourself that you need to do all these things because you're not well. I mean, that's really the message you're telling your mind is, I'm not well. I need to do things. And so what I've learned is you got to balance out the mind so that it's not uneven. Like you don't want to be heavily positive and you don't want to be heavily negative either. I know Andrea can kind of contest this too, because we've talked about it with the coaching that I do, but that's what this is all about. Is it takes so much stress off the body when you start seeing things equally and understanding that it's not just one way or the other. It's a little bit of everything. And it takes so much pressure off your nervous system when you can start to see that, and it will lift so many clouds. Like your health stuff will start to dissipate. I did some work with somebody recently, and they said the very next day, their bowels were the most normal they'd been in 20 years. And it's wild. It's wild, but that's how much our past traumas can affect our bodies and the function of our bodies. People don't realize that we experience things as a child that we take with us forever. So when we experience fear or any difficult situation, the way we train our brain in that state and in that moment, we take it with us forever. So when you hit another fearful moment in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever it be, you respond the same way that you did as a child, but you don't have to. And that's the thing. You don't have to. You can go back to that time and retrain your brain. And that's also part of the work that I do, is helping people get back to that first moment. Because sometimes they'll say, this is the first moment. And that's where my intuition steps in. And I just know it's not. We got to go deeper. And I also can kind of feel into where they're feeling and how much their energy is shifting and if they're hitting it on the mark or not.
Well, and what you're saying, it's like you're trying to put it in a paragraph of a novel of what you have learned and experienced, right? And I'm thinking of me personally working with you as a coach, where you hold space where like literally I couldn't figure out what you were trying to get to for a while, because we're just living in this perspective, right? And then to try and shift and think about back to where this originated, where I first felt this way, where did this come from? And then getting to that spot that you're talking about where now that moment feels really neutral for me. Having the drawbacks, how it's for you and how it's not for you, and how it almost takes away like the fight or
the
like
charge.
I like, if it's about health, I got to get better. But that's like, it's like this, it's like calm. The fight or flight. Yeah. And then it makes it more like neutral, but that's also hard, because if you are sick, if you do have Lyme's, you do have whatever's going on, your body isn't in a neutral state. It is off balance. Your mental health isn't in a space that's calm. So what's your advice for people, like in the midst of when you were really depressed or working with Lyme's and trying to heal? How do you shift your perspective when it's already kind of skewed from the illness? Does that make sense?
So, not to advertise for myself and say work with me, but work with somebody, because often people think I just have to figure this out. I just have to do it on my own. Nobody understands this. Nobody will get it. If I go to a therapist, they're just going to say, yeah, or I hear you, I see you. And you need somebody that can guide you through the conversations. And like I was guiding you, and like you were saying, I didn't just give it to you. And that's on purpose. And that's very intentional, because if I just give you the thoughts or give you the moments, you didn't come up with it on your own. And so in your mind, you may be like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But you have to go through that journey in your own brain of walking it and getting there to figure out, like, okay, how did I feel? Why did I feel that way? And understanding that. And so when people are really struggling and in a fearful moment, what I tell them is to remember in that moment, focus on yourself, focus on me. So me stands for mind engagement. And so what you want to do is focus on your mind and focus on where are you at? Are you really scared of something? Okay. So I'm very over here. So much fear because this, that, and everything is going to happen. Okay. So let's calm ourselves by focusing on the other perspective that we could have. Because the goal is to be an objective thinker. Because when we think factually and objectively, we will feel calm inside. But when you're feeling like, nope, it's way more fearful than it isn't, that's when you start to really have that stress response. And so you need to balance it out. And so whatever side you're seeing more of, you need to find all the other pieces on the other side.
Like that allows you to come back in the center, be more neutral with it. It's a good way. I'm just thinking these thoughts that people are having, how do you combat those thoughts, those affirmations, if they don't truly believe it? Right? Like I am well, for example, when they really don't feel well. So what advice do you have on that when like subconsciously they don't believe that, or with everything in their being, they're feeding themselves these affirmations, but they don't actually believe them? Does it still work in the same way?
It's okay, because at the end of the day, what you want to do is balance it out. So when you are, it will work itself out, and you will realize it when you do the work. When you start journaling, I would journal it, because when you can see it on paper, it's very different than running through it in your mind. And so if I were them, I would write down all the things about your health and why you think you're so healthy, because they're probably going to have a hard time coming up with things for that side and that perspective. And they're going to realize they'll probably have a breakdown moment of, I am not well, I am not okay. And then they're going to be able to look at both sides of it, the drawbacks and the benefits to their emotions and their feelings.
And so I'm curious, thinking about your story and like what you've been through with your health, is that who you're typically helping? Are you typically helping people that kind of have a story like yours and you're trying to help them get well? Or like who do you coach, and like what outcomes are they typically looking for?
It's honestly everybody, actually. It's people that are having personal problems, but it's affecting their business. And so they know that if they can deal with those, then their whole life is going to shift. And I mean, that's true. Like we carry everything over. So if you're having personal problems, it's going to shift over into your business as well. And vice versa, right? If you're having business problems, it's going to shift over into your personal life as well. And so I help everybody, and even people that are just stay-at-home mom, people that are having the health problems because they are seeing things so non-objectively, I will say, and it's causing them some illness because they're only seeing the one side of things. But yeah, moms, dads.
Yeah. It's good to know. I mean, it's so related to your mental health, right? Everything that you're coaching on, like you said, it infiltrates into everything. I want to circle back to like your health being your fault, like thinking of someone, because you've been depressed, and thinking about not having guilt or shame that you're depressed. Like, it's my fault I'm depressed. How would you tangibly help someone take ownership when they are in that low place so they can come out of it?
So I'm going to share a little bit more on that, just because there is a little bit more to that story. I did get depressed again. So I was depressed in my teenage years and took a ton of medication. And what I found was I just felt numb. I still had all the same thoughts that I had, but I actually couldn't even cry. I would feel like I wanted to cry and I needed to cry, but it was the strangest thing. The tears would not come. And so I didn't feel like that was actually working. And, of course, the therapists were just like, oh, it's just a chemical imbalance. This is what happens for some people, like take the medication. And so somehow I got through life. And then I was in this abusive relationship in I think it was late 20s, early 30s. And again, I started getting very depressed and I didn't know why. I'm like, what is going on? And again, asking the why questions, like, what is going on? Why am I feeling this way? My life is not a mess. I don't understand. This doesn't make sense. And so I was looking for a therapist, and I found this cognitive behavioral therapist, which is similar to the type of work I do. And now I understand why it was so beneficial to me, because he was another godsend in my life, because I actually was to the point where I looked at my bank account and I was like, how much money do I have to save myself? Because I'm done. I didn't want to keep repeating this cycle. I was I was sick, and then I was depressed, and then sick, and then depressed. And then it was just like, what am I living for? Because I don't feel well all the time. And I'm just pushing and pushing and pushing, and the exhaustion is too much. And so I went to this therapist, and we did the cognitive behavioral therapy. And I eventually figured out and understood that the voices I was hearing in my head, and not voices as in spiritual voices, but the words that we say to ourselves, I'm not enough, and those sort of things. What I realized were this boyfriend that I had at the time, the words that he was saying was feeding into my subconscious and making me not feel worthy again. And so then again, I was feeling depressed. And so I was able to get out of it by shifting from that point where I had again felt like life wasn't worth living. And so I was able to get out of it. But I will say, if somebody is feeling that way, like I said before, you can't do it alone. But I 100% believe you can get over the hurdle. You can absolutely come out of the depression. I don't know what I want to say on the medication topic and how I feel about that, because I do think and believe that every thought has a chemical response within our bodies. And so, of course, there's chemical imbalances in people that are depressed, but it's also their thought patterns that are creating this. And so you need to work on creating new thought patterns and seeing the other side of things and understanding that, because often people just think is what it is, and it is the way it is. And so they think something's wrong with them, but I don't think anything's wrong with anybody. I think everybody is beautifully and perfectly made, but sometimes we don't want to put our ego to the side and ask for help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think working with someone or journaling, right, it allows you to become aware of what thoughts am I even having, and then take it one step further of, okay, now I'm aware of these thoughts, and what the hell do I do with them? Right? Like working with someone like you that can guide them. What are some other tools? So someone, maybe they can't work with someone right now, other than journaling, what would you recommend?
Well, let me say on journaling though, even though you're saying other than that, I would work on getting to the bottom of things. And one of the things I like doing when I'm journaling about something is, whatever your main thought is, start peeling the layers back on that. If I think this, it means this. If I think that, it means this. And you start pulling the layers back. And then eventually you get to this like aha, where you're like, oh my gosh, that's really how I feel. And when you can get to that, then you can actually like see yourself. And I also think it's really important that people start, if you're not journaling, I think it's important to live each day like it's your last, but not in the traditional way that people say that and use that phrase. People often say that and think, oh, live like it's my last day. That means like spend all my money, or go jump out of that airplane, or, go do all these things that I've always wanted to do. And when I say that, I mean, live like it's your last day and you're having that last moment where you're reflecting so deeply on the life that you've lived, and you're taking in how you lived it and why you lived it the way you lived. So live every day that way, where you reflect enough that every day you can live it fully and make changes, and stop living the same way you do every day. That also brings me to part of my keynote where I talk about the capsule of time. Like, I want people to imagine, I can't remember if I told you this one. Andrea, did I tell you about this?
No.
Okay. So I think a great exercise is to look at your life like a capsule of time. And that's what it truly is, right? It's 0 to whatever it be. For some, it's short. For some, it's long. So some, 0 to, it could be 1, it could be 20, it could be 50, 60, whatever it be. And look at this capsule of time for your life. Close your eyes and watch your life play out like a movie, whatever it be, whatever you think it's going to be, the 0 to 60, or you can, go to where you are. And do you like what you see? Do you like the movie that you're watching? All of it. Are there pieces that you don't really like? Are there pieces that kind of trigger you and kind of bug you? Those are the pieces you need to work on, because you can actually go back in time and shift how you saw them, because your perspective doesn't have to stay the same on past events. which is a wild thing. People think it is what it is. I saw it the way I saw it. It happened the way it happened. And it's like, yeah, and you're triggered by it because you believe it happened a certain way. But what if you take the time to think about and reflect on it, then maybe it was a little bit different than it really was? Because you can only have one perspective at each point in your life, right? If you're a young child, you can only have the perspective of the knowledge you have gained from birth to whatever age you are. And so now as an adult, you're able to look at those childhood moments and say, wow, like maybe I shouldn't have felt like such an outcast, because you can see it very differently and see like, oh, I guess I wasn't. And I guess, God was really serving me because I was meant to be in a different friend circle anyway, or just like, that was really good time for me to reflect, or that loneliness has really led me to where I am today of making sure others don't feel that. And so that's something I think is also important for people to do besides journaling, is that reflection piece.
Yes. Oh, I love this so much, because when I think about going to heaven and like my ideal scenario is I'm sitting on a cloud couch and I get to like watch my life back, the parts that I really loved. Oh, I want to go back to that. That would be so cool. And if you think about it that way and you're like, those are the moments I want to create more of. It's that awareness of what you want out of your life and living in that alignment. But what I love that you're talking about too is there's pivotal parts in our lives that are really painful to go back to. But working with you, I realized, and then I could do this with so many different scenarios after I got the skills with you, is like, you go back to that argument with your sibling that was so terrible, right? And it was so hurtful, and for lots of different reasons it didn't go well or whatever. But just for example, you could say, okay, from that discussion with them, I reflected so much about who I am and questioning my values or whatever it might be, whoever you argued with. It creates awareness in you of who you are, what your values are, and how you want your relationships to be. And it can really be a gift. So instead of thinking of this big conflict in your life or this big tragedy or this big whatever it might be, if you can look at it from that neutral lens of the gifts you got from it, the drawbacks you got from it too, neutralize it, it does change how you show up today. Like over time, like what you're saying, you can shift your perspective and it can bring you more peace today. It's like the value of therapy and having a coach. And I just want to hit home like another example of what that could look like if you do allow yourself to go back to that tough situation in your past.
Well, and like you're saying, if you're having an argument with somebody, you also can see them differently than you saw them originally, right? Like at first you think you could have both perspectives of like, it was all my fault or it was all their fault, or you can shift it and realize I was just as equally to blame, or, this was a beautiful experience to have. And you can rewatch it and watch it play out differently than it did originally. And that's a lot of the work I do too, is helping people like rewire and retrain so that when you're in those moments, like we talked about, a fearful moment, right? Like, let's not experience fear the same way we did when we were that 5-year-old kid, because our brains were not equipped to experience it in the adequate, appropriate way that you should, because you were 5. And so we all carry so much baggage with us from our childhood because we were children and we didn't know how to train our brains at that time. And that's okay. And I think it's so important to be vulnerable. And like you're saying, like, think about those experiences from your past and be okay with talking about them and sharing them and reflecting on them and taking your part in it and seeing it differently. Because so many people put up such a wall from so much pain instead of just like, it's okay if I was wrong. It's okay if I am to blame for all of this. I'm okay with that because I know if I take that ownership, I'm going to change, and forever on, it's going to be different.
It is so empowering too to know that you can rewire your brain. You can experience things so differently than you may have even a few years ago or a few months ago. Like this ongoing work, the more you pour into you and you're willing to do the work, it is so freeing. Like all 3 of us have seen the benefits of doing the work. And if you would have told me, even a year ago where I'd be now, it's like, oh, and the people you meet and it all, my perspective of it now too, looking back, it's like, oh, okay, this did happen for a reason. Oh, this makes sense. but it takes going back there. Like that can be kind of scary for people. So I just want to, shout out everyone who is doing this work. It's not easy, but you're on this path for a reason. And then there's something in you telling you, keep going, keep going. I think that's our intuition, something you talk a lot about, and this idea and concept of channeling, I would love to get into. Will you just touch a little bit on that, what it is, the benefits of it, how we do it? Because it's mind blowing.
Are you talking about channeling spirit or just getting more in touch with your intuition?
I think getting more in touch with your intuition for the sake of what do I want, what feels aligned, because when you go back and you look at this story of your life, it allows you to see, okay, what would I shift? What do I want more of? But it is quieting that outside noise like we talk about and strengthening that intuition. So I'd love your take on that.
I mean, I completely agree. It is about quieting the outside noise if you want to get in touch with your intuition, because if you have all this chatter and all these things going on, how are you going to hear those internal thoughts? And an exercise I tell people to do too is to just start getting your brain to look at things a little bit differently, is start doing everything a little bit differently. In the morning when you wake up, even if you're sleeping on the left side of the bed, roll all the way over, get off on the right side. If you usually use a certain toilet in your house, use a different one. If you go for a walk and you always go to the left, go to the right. Just start going different ways, because your brain is in such a patterned behavior every day. It's pretty much repeating yesterday and the day before and the day before. So start showing your brain, we're going to do things a little bit differently. And then you're going to start to feel these little pushes, and you're going to start to feel and hear these little voices within your head that are kind of telling you something's different, and you'll start leaning into it. And you have to lean into those gut feelings that we have. We all have these feelings for a reason. When you have those aha moments or those moments where you're questioning and wondering about something, that's your intuition, and that's your time where you need to step back and reflect. And the only way to really tap into your intuition is to give yourself that time and that quiet space to hear the answers. And don't try to come up with the answers on your own. You can have those questions, like kind of when we did the work, Andrea, it's like I give you the questions and the things to think about, and you have to just kind of give your mind that blank out space. Like you said, you would go running and then you'd get all this clarity after running. I get a lot of clarity after I take a shower because I'm just kind of like la-di-da, and I'm not thinking about too much because I'm just taking a shower. And so you want to give your mind and your body that relaxation where you can just let those other thoughts and the intuition drift in. Because if you're busy thinking about your to-do list and you're thinking about all these other things, there's no way there's any intuition that's going to pop in. Your mind is already running on too many other things. So you have to give it that space. So I know Andrea runs, and that gives her like kind of a more of a blank mind, right? And you're able to start hearing these things drift in. And yeah, for me, it's when I take a shower or sometimes through meditating or going for walks, but just you've got to make sure you give your mind that time and that space.
Which now, I mean, there's so many shows to watch. There's so many podcasts to listen to. There's so many people to follow. And, we're a part of that. And I think it's a big responsibility to be putting content into the world that says, turn us off. I know it's like counterintuitive, but it's like, we want you to sit in silence. Like when I worked with Andrea, it was a long time of me sitting, literally not even writing anything. Like she'd give me a prompt. And I would have to let my mind work and think of scenarios and then write. And it felt like I hadn't done it in 5 years. Or like it just felt so foreign. Like when is it ever silence and you're just sitting and thinking and then slowly writing things out? It's just not what we do these days. And so I just want to give everybody permission to try it. Like challenge yourself to get quiet, to find space by yourself, to hire a coach that's going to challenge you and ask you questions you've literally never been asked, because you don't want to live your life on cruise control, repeating the same thing over and over, especially if you don't feel happy. Like I'm pretty happy with like mostly how my things are going in the order of operations, but it's also good to shake it up and make sure you're happy. Like
Right. Like how often are you checking in with yourself?
Yes. Like
that guy in the airplane. Mm-hmm. You shook his shit up.
I want to know for you what your checkpoints are of like,
yes, how
you know, one, it's your intuition that's talking and not like a critic that's like, you should be doing this, Andrea, you know? So that deciphering those, but like what are you doing to kind of stay in tune with that actual authentic internal voice of yours?
For me, I always know when it's intuition versus my own thoughts, because the intuition is usually a thought that I hadn't had, or it's like, whoa, okay, that seems like it just seems a little off for me. Like that's not my normal thought process. And so I know it's coming from a different space. And that's where I'm like, okay, I know this is coming in from a different higher place than just my own thought process. But we all have these patterns and these typical thoughts that we have. So when it feels a little bit like not the typical, it's like, okay, that's my intuition. Or when it feels like this overwhelming thought or feeling that you just can't shake, it's also your intuition. I think so many people can relate to that, where you have this feeling, you just can't shake it, or you have a feeling and you're like, why do I feel this way? When you ask yourself, why do I feel this way? Because it's your intuition. It really is. I mean, that's the higher power, like feeding it to you. When you're having to ask yourself, why do I feel this way? You're asking it because you know that's not normal that you would feel that way or think that. So where's it coming from? Your intuition.
That's the woo. That's the woo right there. Like, what is that? You know, like for me, I call it God, right? I feel like I'm getting a message from God. I'm getting answers from God. It's like through prayer, but it's so interesting how it feels in your body. Like when you say that, I feel it's very different when I'm on a run and I get creative ideas and pulls towards something versus, for me, actually, showers are not that relaxing. I'm about to get into my to-do list and I feel like I've got so much to do. I got to get out of this shower and get after it, you know? And it does feel so different. It's more of that like expansive versus like contracting, like, oh, I should be doing more. Whatever. Mm-hmm. So for me, like that's how I feel the difference. It feels like lighter and exciting when it's intuitive and these are just words we place on these feelings, you know? And so use whatever words. I feel like sometimes people have a weird reaction to certain words, but for me, it's like, if I feel like it's from God, it's like this higher vibration, power, idea. It doesn't feel like I have to be doing this. It's more of like a creative idea.
There's like a pull. When you said like you can't shake it, it's like, okay, the only way to shake it or quiet it is to entertain it. Like, oh, yeah. Okay. And I think asking questions is your way of entertaining it, is your way of strengthening it. Like what you said, Andrea, it's weird. Like, but has society and culture just made it weird? Because when you actually think about it, it feels really good. Mm-hmm. Like it feels very good to be aligned and in tune and to getting these like downloads of, ooh, let's try that. Like, it's pulling you towards it. It doesn't feel so forced.
Yes.
And when you have so much content to consume and people to watch and comparison, like that feels so forced because it's so unaligned. Mm-hmm. So we want to remind people that our goal is to have you be intentional with who you're consuming, be intentional with when you're consuming us. We're here to help you, but sometimes it feels like too much, and that is going to only block this connection.
Yes.
Is what I've learned.
Absolutely.
I think it's really hard to know what you're blocking unless you work with someone or you follow someone. I think you're such a great person to follow, Andrea, because I feel like your content really leaves me curious for more, whether it's my own answers or wanting to know what it would be like to work with you. And so let's tell everybody where everybody can find you, follow you, and if they want to work with you, where they go.
Instagram, Andrea Lynn Intuitive, which I realize sometimes the word intuitive is tricky for people to spell. So probably should have changed that. But also I am going to be starting my own podcast and YouTube show, which you'll be finding very soon. It's going to be called Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea Lynn. And I'm very excited about that. So you'll be able to find that there. And then my email is just andrealynintuitive@gmail.com. So you can message me through Gmail or you can message me on Instagram. Either way works.
I love it. And you can have all the links. You can find all the links right below in the show notes. So easy access. And Andrea, we leave our listeners with 3 gold stars, 3 top takeaways that you'd like to share.
Number 1, I want people to take away living each day like it's your last, but not, like I said, like not doing all the wild, crazy things, but doing the things that matter the most and doing the reflection on your life and how you want each day to play out. So don't wait till the end, and live it all now. And two, also kind of goes hand in hand with that, but I often tell people, forget about the bucket list. Like, don't do a bucket list. Because to me, if you're doing a bucket list, you're leaving living life to a list. Why? Like, do all those things now or every day. But the reason we do a bucket list is we want to live out life fully, right? Like, we have all these things on there because they're things that are going to bring us so much joy and so much fun and so much happiness. So I'm going to go do this. It's this extreme euphoric experience I'm going to have. But why do we leave that to a list? We should be having those feelings every day. And so I want people to take the time every day, in the morning, at night. You can do it in the morning and think about what you're going to do that day, or do it at night and think about what you're going to do tomorrow. But think about at least one thing that you're going to do that's going to bring you some joy. It doesn't have to be anything that costs money. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. I mean, it can just be calling somebody that maybe you've wanted to reach out to for a long time, but you haven't for whatever reason. And it's probably going to feel really good to do that. Third, I would say lean into your intuition. It's there for a reason. Stop trying to guide yourself, because I promise you, we are all being looked after. And so if you can just quiet your mind and give space for that intuitive guidance that we're all meant to have, you're going to start living your life more fully.
Love it. Beautiful. All right. Up next is Unleashing Ivy. And I feel like I'm being guided right now to ask you about spirit guides or angels. You kind of hinted on them earlier, and I just feel like someone that is like psychic medium. What are spirit guides, angels? Who are they? What are they? And how can we tap into like having them help us more on a daily basis?
So we all have angels watching over us, and then we all have spirit guides, people that accompany us and guide us. Everybody's got the angels in it, but everybody's got guides and different guides that might be leading them. And your guides are more, I would say, a little bit of a more personal guide than the angels. I mean, the angels are the protection, and they're watching over you and they're helping you, but your guides are really there to help keep you in alignment, and they're leading you on the right path. Whereas the angels are going to step in and they're going to protect you, but the guide's job is more to lead the path, if that makes sense. So they're leading the path, and then you've got your angels kind of protecting the path, I almost want to say.
So are spirit guides people that
we know
or know us, or how are they assigned to us?
So there's different takes on that. Some people say no, some people say yes. So I want to say, and what I believe is, so no, you can have a guide that can be somebody you have known, but that's not your actual spirit guide. That can be somebody that's guiding you in life, but your spirit guide is not typically, it shouldn't be somebody that you have known in this current lifetime. It will be somebody that has been with you since birth. And so they were already on the other side.
So like, if my grandma passed when I was in college, she wouldn't be my spirit guide.
No, I mean, but everybody's got a different take on that.
Interesting.
Different, woo-woo people will have different woo-woo takes on that.
And are those something you can see? Like, you can see our spirit guides?
I actually have not seen people's spirit guides. I mean, I shouldn't say I have not. Some, yes, but that's not really something I've ever even tried or focused on. I tend to be paid to do like a medium reading. And so then that's what I'm stepping into, and that's what I'm seeing.
So interesting.
So interesting.
I feel like I have 50 more questions from that.
My question goes off of that is, how can we tap into that and really use that to our benefit?
Tap into our guides.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so important that you let them know that you're wanting their guidance. They need to hear that, and they need to know that. Otherwise, they're going to let you do your thing. They're not going to keep they'll plant the seeds, but if you're not taking them, then you're going to be on your own. So it's really important that you let them know you want their guidance. And so I also remind myself frequently to thank them. When something happens and I know there's no way that was my own doing, it's like, thank you. Thank you so much for guiding me to that today and leading me through that.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. So interesting. So they have our best interest. They're looking out for us.
I sure hope so. Just kidding.
It's so wild to think about. Oh gosh. Okay. And then our last question, if you could go back, Andrea, to your younger self and tell her something, what age would she be and what would you tell her?
Oh, I love this question because I'll be very honest. I actually was just working on this very recently, like my childhood. And even though I love myself today, I really hadn't learned to love the childhood Andrea. And so I've had to kind of relive all of my childhood in a different way to not watch it back with so much sadness and like, oh my gosh, that poor girl, all the stuff she's gone through. And now I watch it back and I see so much happiness and joy and excitement for the future because I know all those little pieces were leading to something. And so I would have told that little girl, like, keep hanging on. You're going to be tougher than anybody you've ever met.
Oh, I love that. Oh, you have been through so much. And I feel like we just scratched the surface. Mm-hmm. And I think being someone's coach, it's so important to Brooke and I, whenever we hire someone to be our coach, that they've walked the walk, mm-hmm. you know, like they've had chronic illness or they're a mother or, you know, like they have like the street cred for what they're talking about. And you do, like, you have been through the darkest dark moments and pulled yourself through, and you are a beautiful person and a great mom, and following you has been so nice to get to know you. So I feel like I said, we just scratched the surface, but we're so happy that we're getting to know you and had your time and have a lot more spirit questions. I know I do. We're going to have to circle back.
Oh, thank you guys so much. Like, I love that you say that because I think the relatability factor is where I really understand that all I went through was for that exact reason. Because if I haven't been through it, people aren't as drawn to me to open up about their things. Because it's like, well, what do you know about this?
Right.
And it's like, well, I do know about it. I know about a lot of it. Because yeah, like you said, we only scratched the surface. I have been through so much more, but yeah, we'd be here all day. So.
Well, like Andrea said, your time is such a gift. We're so grateful for you and that our audience gets access to you now. We leave our listeners with a piece of gold, your favorite quote. Would you please share yours and sign off with yours?
When we are scarred, we hear others' words as criticism. But when we are healed, we hear their words as encouragement.
This is Gold Ivy signing off.
Listen to your truth and go chase your gold. We want to thank you and encourage you to celebrate yourself for taking the time to learn and get inspired in your one beautiful life. And if this podcast means something to you, it would mean so much to us if you'd be willing to take 30 seconds to help support our mission to keep bringing you inspiring stories and guests.
First, following the podcast is important because it helps you never miss an episode. To do this, just go to the Ivy Unleashed podcast show page on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And then just tap the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner or click on follow.
While you're there, if you'd be so kind to give us a 5-star rating and review and share your favorite episode with a friend, we'd be so grateful for your support.
We are thrilled you're here and are so happy that you're taking time to prioritize your wellness, self-discovery, and growth with us.